alternate plan with you for action against Egypt?
I can only say that we are going to engage in these conversations with our friends here and explore the matter.
What do you think of the idea of using force to protect Western projects in the Middle East?
Really no comment on that at this stage.
If a Martian had come down to the world in the second half of the 15th century, he would, and he or she or whatever it would, have probably put the odds that Islam would be not only the dominant but the exclusive religion and society, social form in the world at, maybe 90 to 95%. Because Islam was the most dynamic, creative, civilizational movement until that time. And then it collapsed, it unraveled for all sorts of reasons. But Islamic history is a parallel history that sort of was interrupted. And that long interruption from, say, the beginning, say the Battle of Lepanto, say the 16th century, to the fall of the Ottoman Empire and beyond, is something that allowed the expansion of Western societies to not only overtake but dominate what had hitherto been the Muslim world. These were highly fragmented European, highly competitive societies, and therefore highly creative at the same time. And they'd be able to fill niches very fast. They were highly adaptable. And so Europe was able to sort of take over the world politically and economically. And Islam was all of a sudden going into decline. And as Europeans began to take over the political and economic life of the world, they began to, I wouldn't say impose their tradition. I think the colonial system never was, as in Africa or in Latin America, that kind of domination. It was more in terms of influencing the way those societies developed. And of course, then there was the cataclysmic World War, where the Ottomans decided to ally themselves with Germany, and that was, in a sense, the end of any kind of coherent Islamic polity. The decolonization movement led to experimentation with every form of Western European polity that had been invented in the 19th and 20th century. They tried fascism and communism and democratic liberalism and militant nationalism. Those categories, westernization and modernization, which are pseudo-intellectual categories, became sort of the standard sociological paradigm. And all societies were viewed in terms of to the degrees to which they were resisting modernization, westernization, or accepting it and adapting to it, as if it was the natural thing to do. But all of these collapsed. When the Russians invaded Afghanistan, it was the beginning of the end of their influence. And when the United States lost control of Iran, that was the beginning of the end of Western domination. And as Europe's dominance of the Middle East weakened, the people were left with nothing. Their traditions had been sundered to a great extent. All the models that had been imported from Europe had failed. And so in this vacuum, people felt that none of these models worked. And so they would begin looking into their own history and traditions, one that had been completely neglected and denied in this great advance of of European domination and see whether they could draw out in their own history something that can give them a purpose or significance, a political sense of what the world should be. And so they began looking to Islam. And just as the Bolsheviks represented a small minority, just as the Nazis represented a minority, just as the Iranian revolutionaries represented a minority, just as the Jacobins represented a minority in the French Revolution, so this particular violent extremist part of the Sunni revivalist movement, in this sense the Takfiri movement, gained dominance. And although they represent a very, very insignificant part of the majority Muslim world, very small, they dominate its discourse, they dominate the headlines, and they dominate the political attitudes for and against. In fact, never in history, probably, have so few people caused such fear in so many with such few means. And that's where we are. And everything we seem to do only seems to increase that fear and the power of that small minority to wreak havoc.